A new study finds that U.S. wages still have not caught up with inflation.
Today, we're going to talk about something that directly affects millions of Americans: the rising cost of living and why so many people are struggling, forced to live paycheck to paycheck as prices keep climbing. From rent and groceries to gas and everyday essentials. It feels like no matter how hard people work, their money just isn't stretching far enough. This issue isn't just about numbers on a chart. It's about families, workers, and entire communities trying to stay afloat in an economy where the cost of living keeps outpacing wages. If you want to stay updated on what's really happening with the economy and how it impacts everyday life, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join us as we dive into this important discussion. The problem begins with the rising cost of basic necessities. Over the last few years, inflation has steadily pushed up the prices of groceries, rent, healthcare, and fuel. Even though wages have grown in some industries, they haven't kept pace with the cost of living. That means workers are effectively earning less in terms of purchasing power than they did a decade ago. For example, food prices have risen dramatically, with staples like eggs, milk, bread, and fresh produce now costing significantly more. Rent has also skyrocketed, especially in big cities like New York, Los Angeles, and Miami, where landlords continue to increase prices while housing availability remains limited. For many families, housing alone eats up over 30 to 40% of their income, leaving little room for other expenses. Healthcare is another heavy burden. Even with insurance, out-of-pocket expenses for doctor visits, prescriptions, and emergencies can drain a paycheck quickly. Add to that the rising cost of gas and energy bills, and it's easy to see why so many people feel trapped in a cycle where they earn money only to see it disappear on essentials. What makes this worse is that debt has become a lifeline for millions. Credit cards, personal loans, and buy now pay later services are being used just to cover basic needs. But with interest rates climbing, debt has turned into a heavy chain. People are forced to pay more each month just to service the money they borrowed to survive. So why is this happening? The roots lie in several overlapping issues. Inflation is one major factor. The pandemic disrupted supply chains, reducing the availability of goods while demand stayed strong, driving up prices. Energy shocks, including fluctuations in oil and gas markets, further increased costs across industries. At the same time, corporate profits have soared, with many companies raising prices far beyond their increased costs, effectively passing the burden on to consumers while padding their own bottom lines. The Federal Reserve has tried to counter inflation by raising interest rates. But this has had its own side effects, making borrowing more expensive and pushing up housing costs as mortgage rates climbed. Another cause is wage stagnation. While CEOs and top executives earn record salaries and bonuses, the average American worker has seen little real improvement in take-home pay. Many jobs in service industries like retail, hospitality, and healthcare still pay wages that barely meet living expenses. Even skilled professionals are feeling the squeeze, as their salaries fail to match the sharp rise in housing and healthcare. The wealth gap between the richest Americans and the working class has widened dramatically, leaving the middle class thinner than ever and pushing more families toward financial insecurity. The psychological toll of this paycheck-to-paycheck cycle is devastating. Living without savings means any unexpected emergency, a car repair, a medical bill, or even losing a few days of work, can spiral into financial disaster. This creates constant stress and anxiety, which impacts mental health, family stability, and even job performance. People who feel like they're working hard but still falling behind often lose faith in the system, leading to frustration and disillusionment with politics and government. Economists warn that this isn't just a problem for individuals. It's a threat to the broader US economy. When a large portion of the population spends nearly all their income on basic needs, consumer spending power weakens. This limits growth because people aren't able to buy homes, start businesses, or invest in the future. Rising debt levels also increase the risk of defaults, which could trigger financial instability in banks and lending institutions. If wages don't rise and costs continue climbing, the US risks creating a permanent cycle where most of the population is stuck surviving rather than thriving. Yet, despite all these challenges, there are small glimmers of hope. Some states and cities are beginning to raise minimum wages, and there's growing political debate about how to make housing more affordable and healthcare more accessible. But for now, the reality remains. Tens of millions of Americans are living with no financial cushion, just one paycheck away from crisis. This is not just an economic story, it's a human one. It's about the single mother juggling 2 jobs to pay rent, the young graduate drowning in student loans, the family forced to choose between healthcare and groceries, and the retiree who has to go back to work because their savings have been wiped out by inflation. It's about the people who make the economy run but find themselves unable to enjoy the benefits of it. The question we all have to ask is, how sustainable is this? How long can a society keep running when the majority of its citizens feel financially trapped? That's what makes this issue so urgent. Because if nothing changes, the future could be even more difficult for the next generation. And that's why conversations like this are so important. The reality is that millions of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, not because they aren't working hard, but because the cost of housing, food, healthcare, and everyday essentials keeps climbing while wages remain almost the same. Families are forced to make tough choices, cutting back on savings and even skipping basic needs just to survive. This problem is bigger than individual struggles. It reflects an economy that leaves ordinary people behind while costs rise endlessly. If we don't face it now, the gap between what people earn and what life costs will only grow wider. That's why it's so important to stay informed and understand the truth behind these issues. If you found this video valuable, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. Together, we can shine more light on the struggles people are facing every single day.